But yeah, we have just a little over 2 hours for this one, which I think should be enough time. It's 3 movies, but it's still going to be a blast to talk about. So if you're ready to hear about 3 of my childhood favorites, Cat in the Hat, Shark Tale, and Click, well then settle in because we are here for a Framewreck redemption.
What a story, Mark.
Hello, everyone. What, Matt?
We'll just fix the part where you called it a Framewreck redemption in post. It's fine.
Did I call it a Framewreck redemption? Because we are here for a Framewreck redemption.
Yeah.
Because you said Framewreck redemption.
Yeah. Do you want to take it again? We have that luxury.
I would love to take it again, but also, guys, this is behind the scenes of me and Matt every time we record. But also, spoiler alert, I'm going to be trying to redeem all 3 of these films. All right, Nostalgia Junction, let's roll it.
What a story, Mark.
Well, yeah, doggy. Welcome to Nostalgia Junction here. I love that little country swang twang, do your thing music right there. It is so fun. 8 hours of doing this in this live stream. I'm getting a little woozy, but I think I've hit that barrier of, okay, I need to eat, but I ate a little bit, so I'm kind of in my wired mode, which is perfect for Framewreck, because we are talking about 3 movies from my childhood this time on Framewreck Nostalgia Junction. A great idea that Matt came up with at the top of this year to talk about 3 of his childhood nostalgic favorites. They were specifically swashbuckling. This one is specifically my favorites from childhood, but also ones that Matt didn't like the first time around, so there's that element of Framewreck of, is it really a bad movie like Matt once thought they were? Are they actually good movies like I once thought they were? Or is it somewhere in between? Or is it neither or all the above? Whatever it may be. Matt, how are you doing? Good, welcome back. Good to see you.
I'm doing well. Revisiting these movies was interesting for me because there were some surprises. There were some not surprises. And some of them, we'll get into it in a minute. Some of them were as bad as I always thought they were. Some had elements to them that I didn't realize were good the first time, even if the rest of it didn't work quite as well. And the one, here's the real secret. The one I thought was going to be the one that I ended up liking a whole lot because it was the one I hated least out of all of these, ended up being the hardest one to watch for me. So I'm very excited to talk about these. I don't know what order you want to go in, but
I've just been advertising it this way, where it's like Cat in the Hat, Shark Tale, Click. Well, we can really go whichever order we want to. I think I went by release order, which is why I put it in that order, because that was kind of when I discovered them as a kid. But let's start it off. Oh yeah, with Cat in the Hat, because spoiler alert, and I kind of alluded to this before we started recording. These are all childhood favorites of mine. So they were not just movies that I liked as a kid. They were movies I watched so much as a kid. My mom and dad can attest if they're watching it. I don't know if they are. They are. Love you, Mom. Love you, Dad. I wish Honor Marie had won the Derby. But I really
chosen one. Or they were the chosen.
She was the chosen one. No, but I really do think these are 3 movies that, as much as I can acknowledge the flaws in, and as much as there are moments where I'm like, ooh, yikes, aged poorly, or yikes, was always poor. I still can't dislike them. You know what I mean? And some of them might be because they are so batshit and crazy and wild, but I really cannot dislike these movies, which I think is so funny because Wynn's like, no, it's so bad. No, I get it. I get it. And we're talking about Cat in the Hat first because I think this is the one that it's kind of universally, if you look at these 3 movies, like you got a lot of people who are still fans of Shark Tale who are like, oh, it's childish, but I like it. Or you have people who definitely like Click. I think that's kind of the 3, the one that's kind of been the most redeemed with culture over time. But Cat in the Hat's the one that everyone is like, yeah, no, this sucks. But to them, I say, you're fired.
Oh God.
Okay. Matt,
oh man, all the best things, and I use the word best loosely. You're just bringing up here all my favorite sounds from this movie.
Yeah. I love, but hey, you can't say that it's not memorable, even whether we know it's good or bad. I think it's very memorable.
Okay, so before I get into kind of my history with this, because I'd like to do with these as well, since they're your nostalgia, but they've also been around for a long time for me as well, and I came at them from a different point of view, obviously, than you, because I'm an old person. So I before I get into that, one thing I love about what we do on Framewreck is that we don't. Our goal isn't to talk about why a movie's bad. Our goal is to talk about why a movie's great. Mm-hmm. And that's why when we talk about the so good, bad, they're good movies, it's what makes this movie great, and then we talk about the bad things, because that makes those movies great. So I'm most excited here that even if I didn't like them or they didn't hold up for me, I'm not spoiling how I feel about it. But if they didn't work out for me or whatever, I'm excited to hear you talk about them. That's going to be my favorite thing.
Yeah, because that was the thing with your nostalgia movie club too. Is like I watched some of them and it wasn't even like, oh my god, these are awful. None of them were like that, but a lot of them were just like, all right, I thought it was okay, But because you love them, I like them more by the end of our conversation, just because I was invested in your passion for it,
right.
Or I was even more reminded of what didn't work for me. And I think that's the thing with all movies, is that they can really split you down the middle, especially in these movies. Like there are people who give this 5 stars on Letterboxd, and there are people that give these half a star on Letterboxd. I mean, look at the Letterboxd curve. This is rarity right there. You see as many 5 stars as you do 1 stars, but really the only review that Cat in the Hat is not really getting is a 4.5. So I think that says a lot to just what people value in movies, and like maybe they're joking about it if they give it a 5-star review, but at least they want to give it a 5-star review. It's
what I find interesting is, yes, the 5 stars might be a joke. There are 4.5 stars. That I don't see the joke in that. Like it's not that it's high or anything, but some people are rating this because the 3.5s, the 4s, the 4.5s, there's no joke there. That's just somebody who likes.
If there's a joke, you're either like 5 stars or you're like half 1. There's not a lot of nuance in the middle. That's why when I rated like Batman and Robin 3 out of 10 or 6 out of 10, like a 3-star, how do you read into that? And it's because I genuinely like the movie, but I do agree it's very schlocky, very campy.
Right.
But then The Room, I gave a half star, but I still think it's one of the greatest movies ever made. Because it's terrible. So
exactly. So for this movie, a little bit of background with me. Mm-hmm. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. SNL in the 90s especially was my thing. You talked about before how actually like the 90s kind of cast is kind of one that you connect with. That was my cast. Like Mike Myers, Dana Carvey,
Sandler.
Sandler a little later. Yeah. Sandler was kind of there was the crossover. That was kind of almost the next generation, but they were there at the same time.
Was Will Ferrell around that time too? Or
Will Ferrell was after. That's like the 2000s. Like the late 90s, early 2000s. Right. So Phil Hartman, Chris Farley, Chris Rock, those type of people were there around that time. So, but my favorites, which I was a big Chris Farley fan, but my favorite cast members of all time are Mike Myers and Phil Hartman is my sentimental favorite. He's never done any bad. He's never done a bad sketch, even if the sketch wasn't good. He was great in it. Phil Hartman's always going to be great. But my favorites, the ones that I connected most with, were Mike Myers and Dana Carvey. So, which is why if you saw our Leprechaun video last time, there's in the opening I made for it, there's several clips of Wayne's World in it.
Hey, we have time. We have time.
It kind of reminds you of that movie, The Leprechaun. Remember with that little guy goes, "I'm the leprechaun." Garth, I'm the leprechaun.
So that is an example. I didn't want to play the whole thing because you have to watch our Leprechaun episode to see the full thing. But it's a big influence, Wayne's World, and it is kind of the most popular, I would say, thing to come out of SNL, as far as I can think of.
Yes, I agree. So anyway, so those guys are my guys. Shortly before this movie, so the movie Grinch came out. I liked that movie a little bit more than most people. I remember I saw it in the theater. I like it. I do understand it's not very good. Like I understand the badness of it, but that's part of I think why I like it so much. The Grinch comes out, and then not long after that, a movie called Master of Disguise came out, starring Dana Carvey. And suddenly I was like, wait, Dana Carvey can make bad movies? Because I'd seen so many of his movies, and whether they were good or not, I was such a big fan of his. But for the first time, I'm watching Master of Disguise, and I'm like, this is terrible. How is this happening?
Yeah.
A similar thing happened just a little bit later. I don't know the exact dates of all these things, but I know just a little bit later, Cat in the Hat comes out.
Yeah.
And I was like, Mike Myers too? What's happening? Like, how are they all making these bad movies? And then Mike Myers went on to make a string of really bad movies.
Right. Yeah, like Shrek felt like his last big hurrah before. And that is not even, I don't think, a Mike Myers movie as much as it is him doing a role in a DreamWorks movie, you know, because you don't see him, you know, it's his voice. But and that's interesting because, like, my perspective, each of these different movies has a different origin. One of these was just a VHS or DVD that came up one day. I put it in, watch it all the time. Like, I never was like, I want to see this movie, I want to own this movie. It just, I owned it and it was there. And that was this one. And then the next one we'll talk about is one I actually did see in the theater and then bought on DVD and watched over and over again. The third one is one that I was supposed to see because I was too young, and my friends in the theater that I was doing a show with, I saw it because of them, and I watched it, and I watch it all the time, but secretly. But Cat in the Hat is the one that just kind of like appeared one day. It wasn't like, I don't think I went to the theater to see it. Maybe I did. I don't remember. But it was one of those movies that just was a DVD I had that I played all the time. And I really don't know where that origin came from. It's the one that I'm most foggy with in the origin. But I remember just like never getting tired of it, which maybe makes me a weird person. We'll find out. But yeah, it was very interesting how it just kind of like came into my life. Just so randomly, and like the cat does in this movie. Just really comes in completely randomly with no introduction, really. I mean, he sings an intro song, but he bursts in and it's his movie, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's there was a thing, Dylan, that you may not even been born when this trend started, where Dr. Seuss aesthetic became a thing, like a big thing. We were wearing Cat in the Hat hats, but like in different styles. Anybody in the comments who is old enough to remember how we wore those really tall hats? Please chime in.
Wait, like it was just like not even for this movie. It was just a fashion choice.
No, it was well before this movie.
Whoa.
Yeah. We were doing weird things in the 90s. We were trying to find our place. And then Seussical happened.
Yes. Now that I could speak a little bit about because I did Seussical 3 times in my lifetime. Once when I was in middle school, once when I was in high school, and then another when I was late in high school. And I played Horton all 3 times. So like I understand the Seussical craze. It's also one that continued over, like I alluded to like schools, and like everyone puts it on. If you're in like a middle school or high school, eventually you will put on Seussical just because it's like the easiest show to cast with either adults or kids or both. Like if you have a children's program, you could have an adult play Cat in the Hat or a kid play Cat in the Hat. It doesn't matter. It's, you know, it's not like a 1776 where if you were to put it on with a bunch of middle schoolers it would work, you know. And I would love to see that actually. But yeah, so I was big on the Seussical craze, but I know it was even bigger like when it was on Broadway because Rosie O'Donnell played the cat. I remember that was a big deal. So yeah, Dr. Seuss was at a hype, and then like you said with Grinch, like Grinch was so big, whether it was received well or not, it was just very popular. People saw it, people loved it, and that was at the height of Jim Carrey, who continued then to work and still put out hits. Like Bruce Almighty happened after Grinch, so he lucked out. He didn't have the curse of the SNL guys where he made more movies and with each one was like a diminished return, you know.
Right. So so that whole, like, there was a very Dr. Seuss aesthetic that was going on within our entertainment and our style for honestly a good decade there. Like it wasn't hot the whole decade or whatever, but there were things here and there. I think that this movie was kind of the death knell in that for a while until Horton Hears a Who, which kind of revived it a little, that whole thing a little bit.
And again, it was animation, so there's a different idea, but like also Jim Carrey. But a very interesting pivot because I think this was so unsuccessful. At least kind of scarred a lot of people, so they might not have wanted to go for it. Because also, I mean, we'll get into the specifics a little bit, but like it's got the same problem that Cats has, where a lot of people are just uncomfortable by the look of it all. You know, this giant furry thing with this tail and the face and the whiskers. Like I think that's probably where a lot of people's criticisms start with it. Is just the overall look and the uncomfortability and the things. The things look crazy too. Because they got that real Who like makeup, which works much better seen from afar than up close. So it works better in like something like Seussical than it does in these movies like this and the Grinch, where it's a little uncanny valley. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I completely agree, and there is an uncanny valley, which is actually a thing that we like about Seuss a lot of the time, is how it doesn't like how strange it feels to look, like how strange it looks, and how it doesn't there's obviously this is its own world thing, but there is something in this movie, especially with the cat, that is it does make it uncomfortable. I will also say that there's a lot of Mike Myers stuff in it that could have been and feels like should have been really funny, especially when he's as the cat playing multiple types of characters within the thing, because he was doing that a lot in before this. I think So I Married an Axe Murderer, which is another nostalgic favorite of mine. I recommend. He played his own father, and that may be the first time he did this. But then in the Austin Powers movies, he's playing several characters.
Right, and I think that's why they decided to go that route, is because they're like, well, it works so well in Austin Powers. But also Austin Powers, I feel like he's playing different characters. It's not like in this one, it's very clearly the cat playing different characters, and they don't try to hide it very much. Like, it is very much still the cat in drag, or the cat as the guy under the hood with the butt. It's very clearly still Mike Myers as the cat, not necessarily him disappearing into these multiple roles, like in like Coming to America as well, for example.
Right, exactly. So like there's things in it that even those parts feel like they should have been real, like they could have worked really well, at least in my history with Mike Myers, and some of them worked a little bit. The one where he's doing the infomercial works a little bit for me, because there are some infomercial staples that he really hits. But then like it doesn't feel like like he lands the punchlines in that. Like, and that's that. I think that's a lot of this movie, is that when we get to a resolution or a point where something can be funny, he says, "Oh yeah," and then they run off to do something else. Like, which is the Cat in the Hat. I mean, that makes sense. It just doesn't work for me in this movie. I want to hear about your experience growing up with it, like how it made you feel, how you felt about this movie, and how you felt on a rewatch of this.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that most appealed to me as a kid, and we can talk about it a little later, but the style of it, and this is something that I still feel rewatching it that I think it really gets right. Just the whimsy and the way that everything is so beautiful and pops in color, and everything's so crisp and clear. Like, yes, it's about a house getting trashed, but even when like the paint is splattered on the wall and stuff, there's still an excitement to it. And then to see it all get cleaned up, like as a kid, I was just obsessed with all that stuff. And they do draw attention to it when they're like riding down the flume and they're like Universal Studios, which I think is a fun bit. But it's also like one of those things where it did feel like you're on a theme park ride. It feels like you're going into a whole nother world. And as a kid, I was 5 at the time. This was as much of an immersion into worlds, other worlds I had never seen before, because it was also very familiar, because it's kind of like still a little cute and suburban, but there's this little edge to it that makes it feel otherworldly. Whereas something like Lord of the Rings at the time, I love it. And I think Lord of the Rings is better than this. Shocker. But I do think I said it is better than this, man.
I know. Yeah. I was reacting to the hot take you just had.
Yeah, very, very hot take. Especially the second one, like very hot take. The second one's my favorite. But I do think the that kind of immersion is a little different because it is so foreign. But this one, there was still that idea of, oh, it could happen to you. Like, and I think that's why the books appeal too, because it's like you're just a kid in a neighborhood. And I think ultimately what it was getting at in terms of its themes mostly makes sense, of like, yeah, like you can have fun without being, too rambunctious and messy, but also you can still have fun. Like you don't have to necessarily be Dakota Fanning, who's prim and proper. I think her big thing is learning how to loosen up a bit, and his big thing is learning how to rein it in. And I like that kind of polar opposite nature of it that I related to as a kid, because I was the oldest sibling, so I kind of had to be the Dakota Fanning. But also, I think inside my little imagination dill brain, I wanted to be the kid sliding down the stairs on a bunch of packages of hot dogs and surfing down the stairs. Like there was a part of me that liked the dichotomy of the two kids, and because it is still kid focused, like I always like to think it is Sally and Carmine's story. It is not the Cat in the Hat story. He is mainly a supporting character in their journey. He is the main character in terms of billing and screen time and dialogue, but it is their story. I also loved Kelly Preston. I was in love with her. The first, I don't want to say this on a live stream right now, but it was the first time I had. Nope, never gonna say it. It was. I feel like I have
listen,
to. But
we
it was
can
the first time I realized that moms could be hot. And that was. Okay. No, but it's the one thing where I was like, oh my god, I'm in love with that mother. And I was 5. But that's the kind of thing, and I did find the humor at the time. Most of the humor, I think, works for especially a 5-year-old. Under the hood, mister, and he's got the butt ass crack out, was the funniest thing in my household for months. We would rewind that, I'd play that over and over, and my dad would joke, and he would do it at the couch. Like, it was, sorry, Dad, I outed that. But like, no, like we would reenact it. Like, it really was just something that also just isn't boring. And I think even if you do dislike the movie, you can at least admit it's not boring. It's definitely not boring. I don't think there's ever a time where you're like, all right, next scene. Like it moves, and it moves fast. And I think that was just something that as a 5-year-old really appealed to me. The magic of Seuss, as JD says in the comments. But rewatching it, I can now see the things that piss people off or that annoy people. I think it is a lot about Mike Myers' performance, because it is a lot. It almost feels like when it, like you said, when it wants to have this moment of either tenderness or emotion or any sort of payoff, it just kind of undercut by him. But again, like I said, because I grew up with this, because this was such an ingrained part of my childhood, like I was still laughing at scenes of this. I watched these movies last night, and I watched this one, and I was laughing, and I was not expecting to laugh, because I haven't watched this since probably I was like maybe 7 or 8, like 2005 or 6. Like I don't revisit this one a lot, but I was finding myself laughing. And like Alec Baldwin, I don't know, there's something funny in the fact that, and I know you probably disagree with all this, but like there's something funny in the fact that Alec Baldwin is in this movie. Like it just at the time I was like, he was like a big A-lister at the time, I would say, or like at least a B+ list maybe. But and the fact that he is in this movie, and I feel like that's the thing, is everyone's also committed. Like oh my god, I'm gonna forget his name. Will and Grace.
That's Sean Hayes.
Sean Hayes is also very committed. You know, is he committing to something that is right necessarily? No, but like he's committed. And I think Mike Myers is also committed. That's the thing, is I think everyone still cares and wants to make a good product. The only one who might not is Mrs. Kwan, but she has to not. And I love that too. Yeah. I think Mrs. Kwan, before I knew what Weekend at Bernie's was, I was like, this is such a genius idea. She's not even a person anymore. And I thought there was something so funny in that as well. I don't know. I really dug this movie as a kid. Rewatching it, I see the flaws. I see the reasons people don't like it. I don't think it's nearly as offensive as some people might say, unless I'm just not necessarily picking up on that stuff, because it is the nostalgia vision and goggles. Whereas like I think another film we'll talk about a little later, I think I could definitely see the offensive bits of it. But this one, like, I enjoyed the rewatch because I just enjoyed kind of remembering all the moments from my childhood again. And like, yeah, Cat gets annoying, but I think the kids get annoyed at it, so it's a little bit more forgivable, because we are, at least because I grew up watching it as a kid, the kids lens into this movie. Right. So I'm able to see, oh, Cat, shut up. Like, that is the audience, that is me, but I think that's because I relate to the kids a lot. I don't know. I want to hear your thoughts.
That's good. Well, first of all, I don't know about offensive. I don't think I've ever found it offensive necessarily. Okay, except offensive to good taste. But other than,
well, that's the thing, is like sometimes I just don't really realize like, oh, that was out of taste, in poor taste. Like, spoiler, one of the movies we'll talk about, I think there are frequent examples of I'm like, oh, that is a.
I think both of the movies we're going to talk about have bad taste.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, but I do think that this one didn't have any of that. But I that's why I said that, because I don't know if it did, and I just didn't pick up on it. So I'm glad there's at least none of that. Like it is harmless.
The only person of color in it was Cat. And he was only partially colored.
Mrs. Kwan. Right?
Oh, that's right, Mrs. Kwan. Well, but that's the other thing that I wanted to say. She is. That's the other thing I want to say. Mrs. Kwan was the best part of Ivory. She was so funny. Like everything about her, and I'm like, this is what this movie is like, because there's a difference between the comedy that they were doing there, which was so subtle and interesting and funny, and obvious. Also, like, subtle and obvious is weird, but like you understand it and it makes sense and it's funny for all ages. There's such a huge difference between that and what Mike Myers was doing in this movie, and so like the Mrs. Kwan stuff was so good.
No more big government. Like, that is so good. She starts putting on like Taiwanese rallies and shit. Like, I don't know. I think there's some genuinely funny bits in this thing.
There's some funny bits with Miss Kwan. I agree. Before I get into the other part, I do want to mention that the thing that you were having trouble saying about Kelly Preston is much better than what we were all thinking you were about to say about Kelly Preston and your first time doing a thing. So
oh no, I was 5.
Well, you didn't say 5 until the end of that whole thing. So you were like, it was the first time. Never mind. I don't want to say that on a stream.
Oh my god, no! Oh my gosh, I didn't realize.
That's anyway. So let me tell you about. Other than Mrs.
Also,
Kwan,
rest in peace, Kelly Preston. Gone way too soon. Would love her. She is a beaming light of sunshine.
I also was in love with Kelly Preston. Mine started far before you were born. But especially in like I believe that she's in Jerry Maguire. And I really love her in that. She's in a lot of stuff that I was just
she's great.
Sky High. So I also had a love for her, and when I was a kid, none of the things I said were really I was that young for. But
pulling up this comment, when I did not say that because that's not actually what I was going for. But now that I say it, I'm like, okay. No, I was trying to describe MILF without using that term because I find it a little bit derogatory. But like, it was the first one I saw in cinema where I'm like, whoa, moms are not just these. You know, like, because when you're 5, it's like your mom is your mom. Like right. you're not trying to
No, I get it. I bet if I thought hard, I could come up with when that happened for me, but it's probably something from the 80s. But anyway, so maybe Steve Wallace. I don't know. Anyway, so what was I saying? Oh yes, okay. So the other thing, so Kelly Preston and Mrs. Kwan, I love Kelly Preston. Mrs. Kwan is very, very funny. Sean Hayes, I think he plays the fish too, right? I think he's much better.
Is he the fish as well?
I'm pretty sure he's the fish also.
I didn't even realize he was. I thought for some reason the fish was Will Arnett for some weird reason.
Will Arnett was not really. I mean, he was on Wrestling.
No, he is the fish. He is the fish. You're right. Okay. What am I thinking of Will Arnett? I'm gonna find what I was thinking of. But yeah, Sean Hayes is really good as a fish. Again, the fish, fun character. I think he's funny.
I think the fish is good. I think he feels like what the Sue story is, like that feels so correct in this movie, and Sean Hayes is really good. Whatever Sean Hayes is doing at the beginning is very weird, but it's supposed to be, and I get that. It just is kind of like annoying, and it just doesn't tickle the funny bone for me.
Right. Will Arnett is in Horton Hears a Who. That's right.
Yes. Yeah. I will say that I texted you this when I was watching it. And that is that if Mike Feist doesn't play Sean Hayes' son in something at some point, what are we even doing? Like, He looks so much like Mike Feist in this movie. He does. But anyway, so besides those things, the thing that surprised me this time that I didn't pick up on the first time, probably because of how annoyed I was with this movie when I watched it the first time, is how good Dakota Fanning is in this movie.
Yes, and
she is so good.
Spencer Breslin too, but mostly Dakota Fanning.
Spencer Breslin is good, but like he doesn't have as much to work with, I think, as she does, and so she's got she is so funny, and it's not just the material, because we've seen that the material is not funny on everybody else. It's not just the thing she has to say. It's how she so perfectly understands the assignment. She so perfectly understands how she's supposed to be saying everything in this movie and how she's supposed to be doing and acting. She surprised me so much. If I laughed at all, and I imagine I probably did. I mean, besides Mrs. Kwan, if I laughed at any stuff they did at any point in this movie, it was her stuff. Like when she's asking for tasks or whatever, or rules. Or when she's talking about how she won't play with the other girl because she always wants to be the leader, and she's not the leader. She can't be the leader. I have to be the leader. Like all that stuff. She's just so funny, and she performs it so well. There's a reason she was the only kid actress we would go to at that time.
And the only other one was like her sister. Yeah.
Well, her sister. I had a theory. Let me tell you about my theory for a while. I had a theory, which was that Elle Fanning okay, so for a while, Dakota Fanning was in so many movies that it's like, is she ever going to grow up? And it's like, well, they keep cloning her. And Elle Fanning is the one that didn't go quite right. So they're like, let's just put her out as another girl, as a different girl. It's how I always, is the kind of joke I used to make about it. But yeah, she was great. And then after Dakota Fanning aged out of these roles, then we got Abigail Breslin for a while, and then she went away. I would like Abigail Breslin to get the same Dakota Fanning treatment, because I would like I just think these talented young kids need chances to be good outside of being kids. But anyway, so she was really great. And I did not see that the first time around.
Yeah. My favorite scene of hers. My favorite scene of hers is when she's watching the birthday party inside, because you really don't get the sense that she's not liked or not popular. But then when she's like, when they're going around to try to find the dog and they're looking at the window and she's like, "Oh, I didn't get invited." There's like that moment where you're like, your heart breaks for her, stuff like that, and you realize that maybe it's because she is a little uptight, but I think it really works. I definitely related to that as a kid. She was my favorite actress growing up because of this, and just other things I'd seen her in. Like I thought she was so good. What else? What are her other big things that I saw her in at the time? Let me look. Charlotte's Web. I remember really liking her, and she's the little girl, Fern, in that one. I remember growing up liking her in that. There was another one, Dreamer, the one about the horse, which no one has probably ever seen unless you grew up at that time. But like stuff like that, where I was just like, yeah, like it was just someone I always loved to watch on screen. And now it's good that she's kind of getting a little bit of a comeback with like Ocean's 8 and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and all these movies that she's getting.
M. Night Shyamalan's daughter, I forget her name, is
yes,
it has that new one, Watchers or whatever. Dakota Fanning is the lead in that. That's exciting for two reasons, like Shyamalan's daughter plus Dakota Fanning. It's really exciting.
Kids of the thousands taking over.
Yeah. I could definitely see that growing up, how it's even both of them, like there's probably aspects of you in both of those kids, and that I could see how that would be. Fortunately for me, I was early in it, but I was in my adulthood, and so like it did not hit for me the way that I hoped. And like I said, I had been building up to this disappointment with Mike Myers for a while, right. So it was this
didn't bring you back.
It didn't do it, and
that's fine.
I will say that I think this is also true about one of the other movies we'll talk about, and we'll kind of get there here in a little bit. But I feel that this movie, like another one, did not fully take advantage of its premise. At least it did not take advantage of it in the most interesting way, like in the way that could have been a lot more fun than it was. Because the Cat in the Hat story, it's raining, they have nothing to do, so he comes to give them some fun, and then they mess up the house, and then suddenly it's like, oh god, I have to do this thing. They spend very little time in the house before it just gets like literally sucked into a hole, or like becomes a canyon, and then they leave the house, and it's no longer that. So I feel like there was, if they had leaned into the mischief a little bit more as far as in the house and causing the havoc in the house, that would have been more interesting to me than for a good portion of this film, them trying to fix the havoc. Like, fixing it is supposed to be the quick thing. Like, that's supposed to be we press this button and suddenly everything's cleaned up. Right. I think that's also a big thing for me.
And I do think that adding the Alec Baldwin character does add a fun dynamic, because it's also like the kids know he's not really all he's cracked up to be, but it's still one of those things where you have this obstacle now that you really can't work around, because Miss Kwan's easy. You can hang her up in a closet, you can ride her like a freaking sled down the stairs, boom, 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 boom. Like Miss Kwan is so good, but it is also very tough, with now Alec Baldwin's character being in the mix. And I honestly think if they had kept him more of like a straight-laced guy who is just like mean and hates kids, and actually made him like kind of more mischievous and that we take him more seriously, I think it would have honestly heightened the stakes a little bit more. But because we see him as kind of a bum, it makes it less like, all right, so if he catches them, he's a bum, which I think is one of the disservices of it. His character's very odd and very weird.
I thought that was weird too, that like, and I didn't remember that was the case. I actually thought it was the thing that you were just saying, like that he is just this uptight guy who's just trying to get rid of the kids. I don't know why they did the, like, it's weird that they did the like unemployed like slob thing for him. Yeah. Where, because it would have been far more interesting if there had been if it had been them trying to save themselves, like that him being uptight was part of what they were trying to hide. Like, but it turns out, I think it's supposed to show.
Yeah, so he's like, not right for the wife or for Kelly Preston because he's a slob and she likes it everything neat. But the reason she likes everything neat is because not because of her, it's because of her boss. Like it's not her problem. It's that the boss likes everything tidy and neat. So that doesn't even make sense.
And we already had plenty of reasons that they were not right for each other.
Right.
Number one, he wants to get rid of her kids.
Right, which is number one. And I do think on a level this does work as like, because there's that moment where Conrad says like, I wish you weren't my mom, and she says sometimes I wish the same. She closes the door and you see this really authentic emotional moment, and it's stuff like that where I'm like, I think it really is trying to say something about the parents and kids, especially single parent households, especially one parent households. I think it has some really insightful stuff to say about it and how taking care of kids on your own is tough while working a job. It is tough, and from that lens I think it's easy to see that you have to work hard for it, but also like that sometimes you're doing a good job and you need to be reminded of that. And I think when they eventually, Ken Hat is meant to be like kind of that snake in the Garden of Eden, tempting the kids to do all this mischievous wrong and bad, but they end up doing good by the end. They end up learning from their mistakes and wanting to fix it for their mom. And I think it is a really big growth for both of them. And that's why I think this actually has some really sweet things to say. I think really what sticks out most is the mania that I think people can't get past. But I really do think at its core, the messaging is actually very sweet. And I just want to talk about it really quick. This movie looks really good in terms of its visuals. Emmanuel Lubezki shot this. The guy who did Gravity, Birdman, The Revenant. Like, this guy knows what he's doing visually, and it shows. I think all the camera angles are really cool. I think that's why we get so much great Mrs. Kwan humor, because he always knows where to put her in the frame to make it the funniest bit when everything's happening around. She's always centralized in the frame or like very clearly off to the side doing something. Like, I just think the real actual direction and cinematography and the sets are really great and beautiful. I love the tangibility of that last set when everything is kind of in this volcanic weird state and you kind of see like the toilet kind of like, that feels like it actually came out of the Universal Studios ride, like it was actually built. And I know it's for the cheap joke, but it really does feel like this thing that was given a lot of care, which is why it's hard for me to not like it because of all that,
Right. Well, and I could definitely see that. I agree. The look of it is really good. It feels like, it doesn't feel like our world. Like, it feels like a Dr. Seuss world. It looks really good. The shots look really good.
Yeah, it's story.
I think technically it's good. Like, a lot of that is good. And yeah, like you said, like, he's great. Like, he shoots great films, or bad films greatly. But I think I'd like to touch on what you were saying there. Being from a single parent home, I definitely understand that. And there are things, and we talked about this with a movie not about a single parent home, but that I thought was a dysfunctional family.
Back in Me?
No, it was because that is a single parent home. But we talked about it when we talked about my movies, Page Master, how I always thought the dad was stepdad, but then I realized, oh, right, wait, because they never say that. Filled it in that way. Yeah. So yeah, like coming from a single parent home and seeing and how hard it is. My mom worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat because she didn't have anybody around. It was the 90s, so we stayed alone. So she could go work 3 jobs, but there are those emotional moments that sometimes I wish you had a different mother too. That whole thing. It's those moments that make the other moments so frustrating for me, because I can feel an emotional center to this that I do dig. It just, like we said before, is undercut so often in this movie that it kind of gets frustrating. overall, I had a better time with this than I thought I would. I still don't think it's a good movie or anything, or something I probably will revisit. Maybe if my kids decide they want to watch it sometime, but I had to pay to watch this one, so unless it's streaming free somewhere, they're not going to get to.
Well, I have to ask you: does this? I don't remember how we did the last Nostalgia Junction. I don't know if we do superlatives, but is this a movie you would consider more of the Framewreck movie, or do you think the badness is just simply bad?
Last time we didn't really do that because they were like three
Right.
well-received movies.
Right.
But as far as this one, I would say this one of all of them is the closest to what we would consider a Framewreck movie.
I agree.
I think that there's enough badness that brings entertainment that I think it works. There's also some heart, like this obviously they didn't fully succeed at what they were going for. Like, so I think that there is a Framewreck equality to this one of the three that we covered. But yeah, so overall I liked it, I think, better than the first time, but still not enough to really change how I talk about it so much. Right. But there were some elements in it that I didn't remember were really good. Like you said, how it looked, the kids, especially Dakota Fanning, Mrs. Kwan, like there were Kelly Preston. There were certain things that in it that I think do redeem it a little bit from where I had it before. But yeah.
What do you think? Last question. A Dirty Hoe. What do you think of that?
I think
I laugh. I don't know why.
Did you laugh when you were a kid? That's when you were 5.
No,
you didn't.
No, I didn't. That's a joke that went over my head that now, and I've seen it memed before, so I knew it was coming. But Dirty Hoe. I'm sorry, I love you, baby. Like, it's so stupid, but like, I don't know. I think it's funny.
That is an example of a Mike Myers joke that works better elsewhere because he plays up the cheesiness of it. Whereas here it feels like a joke we're supposed to laugh at because it's funny rather than a joke we're supposed to laugh at it because it's cheesy. So I think that kind of just that's actually a good example of some of the problems I have with it, is that like it could have worked, but they may have taken it to like not even too seriously, but they thought it was funnier than it was. Is kind of like where I land.
Yeah, I'm glad we agree on Mrs. Kwan though, because I'm just thinking of some moments in my head that where they like have her tied up a string and they're like pulling her and they like bring her up on the couch. One thing too also is so fun because it's like they are just bundles of caffeine and energy, but like they just bring a lot of the humor, especially with the Miss Kwan stuff. I don't know. I still land more positively on it. I'm not a 5-star letterboxer. Here we go. I haven't logged it again yet. I see here that I rated it a star, but I really do think if I were to rewatch this with a different lens, I might, give it a higher. I will give it a higher rating because I think there's a lot of merit there. But that's a Cat in the Hat. Any last things to say on Cat in the Hat, Matt?
Well, so you mentioned thing 1 and thing 2, and we didn't really talk about it. And I don't think that they. I don't think they were utilized as well as I'd wanted them to be. But an interesting thing is that they were voiced by Dan Castellaneta, who played Homer Simpson. The person who plays Marge is in one of the other movies.
Yes, she is, and she's I think pretty good in it, which we'll talk about. Yeah. I know we don't do superlatives, but do you have anything else to shout out? I think we both agree Dakota Fanning and Kelly Preston are probably the two best performances in it. Yeah. Alec Baldwin might be the worst, if not Mike Myers. But anything else?
I think Alec Baldwin's is more of a is not his fault. Where I think Mike Myers might be a little bit more his fault. So I would say Mike Myers. Anything else kind of had? No, just that there were things that surprised me, things that were the same. So.
Sweet. All right, and no more big government is my favorite line. So now we move on to Shark Tale, which came out a year later. And this one I'll kind of give my short story because there's really not a lot to it. I was a huge DreamWorks and Pixar and Disney kid, so like. All those movies that were coming around that stretch from like Monsters Inc. to Lilo and Stitch to like Finding Nemo, Incredibles, Shrek 2, all those movies around that period of time. I saw every single one in theaters, no matter what. Every trailer, I believe this was either shortly after or shortly before Shrek 2. I forget which came first. I want to say it was Shrek 2 because I remember seeing the trailer for this during Shrek 2. I'm going to have to fact check that, but I remember seeing the trailer being like, oh my God, great. From the creators that brought you Shrek 2, as a 6-year-old now, I was very much like, okay, cool. Shrek 2, guys, I'm in. And we saw it in theaters, loved it. My cousins dressed up as Lenny and Oscar for Halloween. Like, it was a big movie in our culture of our family. We would talk about it a lot because it was like, 6 years old. That's when you're really able to comprehend these movies a lot and really kind of play the DVDs yourself. It's not mom, dad, put this on. It's you're actually putting the DVD in the player. So I watched this a lot, again, religiously as well. And it was one of the only movies next to like The Lion King that had like a main character death that at the time I was like, I can't believe they did that. And I was like hung up on that for so long where I'm like, oh my God, they killed him off so early. And now seeing that's Christopher from The Sopranos, it makes me sad. But I'm like, whoa, like the death in movies? What? This was my Spirit of the Beehive moment. But Matt, tell me about your experience with Shark Tale, or your first experience, I should say.
I was dating this girl.
Oh.
And well, I worked in the video store, so like I was gonna see any movies that came through anyway. But I was dating this girl. And she had a little sister that she lived with, so I brought Shark Tale over to her house to watch it. And I was like, Jack Black. And what's interesting, here's an interesting thing, because my wife did not want to watch it with me, but she did like watch. She was in here when I started it. And I was like, Jack Black is like 4th or 5th build. What the hell is going on? And she was like, yeah, he wasn't like a star yet. And I was like, I was thinking about it, and I was like, maybe he wasn't, but he was in so many things that I used to watch when I was younger that to me he felt like a big name, and maybe he wasn't yet at that time.
I think he was, and the thing is, like, he had come off of School of Rock for sure, but he
had already done School of Rock at this point.
Yes, because it's 2004, right? Or is School of Rock also 2004? It's either the same year. Yeah, it's a year after. School of Rock is 2003. So it's the pre-Kung Fu Panda era, but post School of Rock. And I also think Renee Zellweger, just coming off of Chicago, which is huge, coming off of her other movie that won her the Oscar. I forget the name of it. What is it? The one about the mountain? Cold Mountain. Oh, yeah, I was close. And then obviously Will Smith, who is probably one of the bigger stars at the time, and then Robert De Niro. So I get why he's only 4th build because of that cast. If anything, I thought Angelina Jolie would have been a bigger name at the time too, with Girl Interrupted and stuff. But
she was a big star at the time,
right?
Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Like there was a bunch of stuff that she had done. The thing is, like, she was a much smaller role. He was literally second lead, and so like,
But I think it was really just we need De Niro up there, and then because she was coming off that Oscar win, they were like, we'll put her above. But I agree, the billing is weird because it is more so even than Oscars at times. Lenny's story. I think Lenny is the main rooting interest, we'll say. Yeah,
I agree. So this movie comes out, it's like, oh, Jack Black, Will Smith, this is going to be funny. It's DreamWorks, because what Carly said, I didn't see it.
People don't like Shark Tale. This is the first I'm hearing. I know, Carly, it's a sad truth to find out. It's better received than like normal Framewreck movies are. Like it still has maybe like a 50 or 60. It's in the middle. And Carly actually suggested earlier that we show the letterbox curves for all the Framewreck movies now, so I'll just show this one. This one's kind of similar, not similar, but similar to a lot of movies of that time, where it kind of just peaks in the middle around like the 6 out of 10 range. So it's a very mid film according to this, but there are some like pretty heavy 5-star vocal opinions out there. So maybe Shark Tale.
I bet they're around your age.
They're probably around my age.
But okay, so this movie comes out. I'm dating this girl who has a little sister, so I take it over. I'm like, yeah, I mean, Shrek and Shrek 2. Like, we don't have to talk about the rest of the Shrek movies, but Shrek and Shrek 2 were great.
Masterpieces. At least it's the second one. Yeah, masterpieces.
Oh, I think for me it's the first one. First one is the one.
I agree.
But I was like, okay, they. Surely they're not going to miss here, and this was DreamWorks' like first miss for me, because I'm watching it and I'm like, gosh, this is like the best thing about it to me at the time was that Martin Scorsese was in it and they gave him big eyebrows.
And he's really good in it too. Like that's the thing is, like, I think it's not just like, oh, let's stunt cast him in this movie about like kind of like with mobster culture. Like, oh, if we can get Martin Scorsese, that'd be hilarious. And I do wonder if there was some deal with like him and De Niro where it's like, I don't go if he doesn't go. But I think he actually shows that he can actually command an actual good voice role. I mean, he's got a memorable voice. I mean, he probably should have done more voice roles, if I'm being honest, because he does have a good voice. The thing is, he doesn't have the screen presence, I think, because he's a little more, he's not like your dashing leading man type. So I think he never really wanted to be front and center in live action movies. But I think this is where a niche where he could have worked a little bit more is in voice acting. But anyway, carry on. Yeah.
No, that's so that was my experience with this. I watched it and I was like, gosh, this is just not very good. And because I think I expected a lot from Jack Black, who I'm looking at this poster. On the poster, he's 5th build because Angelina Jolie is above him.
He just keeps going down and down. Maybe nowadays, if they were to re-release, it would be and Robert De Niro. So it would be like Will Smith, Jack. Actually, I don't know if Will Smith would get top billing nowadays. He's banned from the Oscars, so I don't know.
I mean, I'm sure. I don't know. Maybe
it would start with Jack Black. You know, they should have just done an alphabetical: Jack Black, Robert De Niro, Jolie, Smith, with Zellweger and Scorsese. That's how they should have done it.
Honestly, I don't know why after he slapped Chris Rock, he didn't start becoming the Rock Slayer and pretending that he killed Chris Rock's. Anyway, that was a bad joke. But
it's okay. We're on Framewreck. All jokes are bad and good, and all in between.
So anyway, this movie, it didn't work for me. However, it worked for me better than at the time than both Cat in the Hat and Click worked for me. However, this was the hardest movie of all these for me to get through this time. So difficult to get through.
If any of these are movies that I would give now a slightly more skewed negative review, I would still give it a positive because I have that nostalgia. But I do think of the three, this is the one that held up the worst. I think also because we've gotten just so much great animation since. And when you look at this at the time it came out with the Shrek films, but especially like this was a year after Finding Nemo. And I think it becomes a little clear that they're trying too hard to make this be Pixar. And I think the good thing about Shrek and Shrek 2 is it wasn't really trying to do that. There wasn't really any, I mean, you could have the Odd Couple thing with Shrek and Donkey mirroring Buzz and Woody a little bit, but they're not trying to, necessarily chase Pixar. They are literally, and maybe they are, and I don't know it, but they are, original. But here, this is an example of one that I feel like is a little bit trying too hard to be another studio's thing. And I think it's not as successful that way, and I think it's kind of like a one joke movie in a way where it's like, what if this one shark didn't eat meat? Ha ha ha. Which I think if it were a little bit more self-aware of the fact that it is a queer metaphor, I think it were to work a lot stronger, but I don't give it that benefit of that doubt. I don't think they were.
It almost does a trans metaphor for a little bit.
Yeah.
Completely fumbles it, but I'm like, and at the time it wasn't going to be trying to do that, and so I don't blame it. Like it's not like I blame it for that at this point, but there's a point where it's like, wait, is this about to be a really good trans metaphor? And then no, it's like because he's like, I'm a dolphin now, and I'm like, okay, maybe they're going to skew this. It's going to be really interesting, and then but no, he never has allowed that identity.
And they almost make him look clownish in that way too. So it's like they're almost making fun of it, which could be even seen as anti-trans. I think definitely the homosexual stuff there though is very much underlying, but very much there. Because it is, Dad, I don't want to eat meat. Like this is who I am. I'm a vegetarian. And like at the end, it is a father basically giving acceptance to his son. Like I really do think that in and of itself is a good story. The problem is, they try to make it Oscar's story. They're not making it Lenny's story. And I think that's the biggest fault of this film. Again, I like this film because I have the nostalgia tied into it, but I think the animation doesn't hold up well. And I think the actual messaging, I think if they had focused primarily on Lenny and made it his POV, it would have been a lot better. But they try to make it about Oscar, and Oscar is as annoying as ever.
Hearing you, because I hadn't thought about this, and I'm sure I thought about it back then. I hadn't thought about it. Hearing you.
There you go.
Listen.
It's a perfect fin.
Listen, Kelsey, I need you to know, despite the things we're finding out about each other today during this live stream, I will always love you. So please don't hate me. Anyway, so when I hear you say this came out a year after Finding Nemo, it makes this movie feel so much worse. Because the animation is just not good, especially being an even later version, coming out later than Finding Nemo. Like, it is not the same quality at all.
We famously know one of our good friends of the channel does not like Finding Nemo, and here's what he says about Shark Tale. I believe there was it's a lesser DreamWorks, but it's better than other animated movies at the time. Other animated movies at the time were Finding Nemo, so I think you have another one against you in the corner.
That's
Matt.
fine.
But I'm in your corner though. I think Finding Nemo is so much better because also Finding Nemo isn't just like, oh look, fish, ha. It's more just like this really touching story about father and son, and it just happens that they are fish. It's not
right.
The fish is just a metaphor for big ocean and
right.
helicopter parenting in a way. Whereas this one, I feel like the joke is, look, they're fish, haha, but they're also mobsters, haha, and they do make some of the Lenny stuff more of a joke. And it's just got that mid 2000s thing of like having to force in pop music that doesn't fit very well, and the stereotypes. Like, there's just a lot that doesn't work here. But I'll let you talk more about that because that's like your expertise.
Okay, so you also said, just real quick, you also said something that you were like DreamWorks wasn't chasing Pixar. Well, then you could look at this and you were comparing them, and I was like, have they been? I hadn't thought about, like, were they chasing Pixar? And I don't know that they weren't, but I can tell you that they won the Good Dinosaur, the Good Dinosaur off.
Wait, which one did they make?
They made How to Train Your Dragon.
Yes, that was very better. But it's really interesting to look at the parallels, though, because the first big thing is Ants and Bugs Life. And I think from then on, it really was that battle. And I think with the Oscars, the first Oscar went to Shrek. It didn't go to Monsters, Inc. So I think there was that extra pent-up, like, and then the next year, Spirited Away wins. So neither of them win. So I think this was the big year. It's like, all right, well, Finding Nemo needs to win. If it doesn't, then DreamWorks is winning the battle. And then Nemo won. And then this year, Incredibles won. And then the next year after that, or 2 years after that, Ratatouille. So then they kind of got their mojo back. Mm-hmm. But I think it's very interesting that DreamWorks for a while did kind of have the leg up. Because even Ants and Bugs Life nowadays, I think you would say Bugs Life. But at the time, Ants was the one that was more popular. It was the one that was more beloved by people. It was the one that people thought was smarter. Also had the bigger names, Meryl Streep, Woody Allen at the time. But it's one of those things where I really do think for a while, I don't think DreamWorks was necessarily chasing Pixar. I think everyone was chasing Toy Story, but at a point, I think DreamWorks was actually ahead of Pixar in terms of notoriety. I really do. I think it was the Finding Nemo, Shark Tale, Incredibles years, 2003 to 5, that really changed things, changed the tide.
That reminds me of how Michael Scott thinks that the controversy surrounding Woody Allen is that Ants was just a ripoff of A Bug's Life.
That's why. That's the least of the issues.
So yeah. Okay. I was looking at it's definitely, there's 3 directors. 2 of them are definitely white. I don't know about Vicky Jensen, although it's cool that, a woman is one of the 3 directors. But I don't know about Vicky Jensen. But there is so much that feels okay. Lily White.
Wearing white.
So there is so much that feels like they are out of their lane on maybe the Italian stuff they could do. And as an Italian American yourself, maybe you can comment on that part.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is also this is coming off the tail end of The Sopranos. I believe The Sopranos had like just ended, and that's the thing is I think people were really into that culture, and I think that stuff it does well because it is kind of taking a page out of the book of Scorsese. I mean, you have Robert De Niro, who's the biggest like crime star of the time, coming off of decades of great work. You have Scorsese, who's the greatest crime director of the time and of all time, and then you also have Michael Imperioli, who was the second co-lead in The Sopranos. So it's like literally, and Vincent Pastore, who played Big Pussy, is also in this one. On The Sopranos, he played Big Pussy. Not in real life. He's an angel. But
not in Shark Tale.
Not in Shark Tale. Imagine, and he was Big Pussy. No, but I think it's funny because it's like I think that stuff it does well. And like I said, if they had focused on Lenny's story, I think it would have been a lot better. Like, don't even make it about Oscar. And I think that's the problem is they wanted to bank with the Will Smith stuff, and then they were like, well, we can make it also a little ghetto, which is where it goes very wrong. And then you also get the jellyfish are reggae, they're Rasta. Like I feel like they're just trying to like, I'm trying to think of another movie that does something similar but better, where it's like you almost like Zootopia, where you still have biases and you still have stereotypes, but at least the film is trying to comment on those stereotypes. I think at times, even in a few years, I think there are some dated elements, but I think all in all, it's very smart about how it conveys the stereotypes. And this one is not. I think they really lean in a bad
I would say Zootopia and like, let's say,
Wreck-It Ralph, maybe
onward in a way. Like,
okay, Onward,
those movies, you don't look at those
Disney.
You don't look at the characters or the cultures that they create within those things and go, that's the urban. That's the black ones. That's
right.
that's the thing.
Look at Shrek. Even like it's not like it is very much a racial commentary. Like it's very much Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, Shrek 2, where ogres meeting white parents. Like that is very overtly a racial metaphor. But it's not ogre going. I'm not going to try to mimic it because I don't want to come across racist. But it's not ogre spitting some slang and doing some really like stereotypical black stuff in front of King Harold. It's not. It's just the fact that he is and looks different. That's all it needs to be, and that's all it could have really been. Like the fish are different. You don't need to make an emphasis on the point that listen, they have their racial stereotypes.
I can't pretend to understand Will Smith's life or understand what he's gone through or why he chooses the things that he does.
It's got a good
it does make me question. It does make me stop.
It took you a little while.
Well,
get it because he was an Ali.
Yeah, exactly. I was going with Ali, and then I was like, "Oh, God."
No.
Okay.
It also works for this movie because Hook.
I don't presume to understand any of that. I do question why he keeps taking movies that are so racially insensitive, like this, like Bright. Stuff like that, where I'm like, okay, I don't really, and maybe to him there's a good reason, and I'm sure there is, and I'm sure he sees something in it that I don't. But as I'm watching this, I'm like, this is not handled sensitively at all. Everything about Oscar is just it feels like a Jim Crow metaphor. Like that's how it feels. Like it feels like they painted this fish in blackface and are having him dance on the stage. Like that's how it feels.
Yeah, it's the Crows and Dumbo.
Right, exactly. That is exactly how this character feels, and maybe Will Smith found something empowering in that, and maybe there are other people of color who find that empowering as well. To me, as I'm watching it, it just made me feel kind of gross. But I'm a white guy who's never had to go through any of that, so what do I know? I will say that the jellyfish, being Rasta, feels very cringe, and the fact that they keep singing a Bob Marley song would feel worse if it wasn't Ziggy.
Yeah,
and Dougie Doug is the other one. So like, it almost feels like I wish that I had known they had cast them before they animated them, but I don't think that was. I feel like there was probably a character concept, and they hired those two for that reason. But there is something about those two that feels at least right because that is their persona in real life, and Bob Marley's son. So I mean, the fact that he's singing one of his dad's songs,
using the needle drop too. I think that's another thing too, is they want the needle drop, so they almost work the plot around the needle drop, like the car wash thing. I think it was just to get that song, get Christina Aguilera to sing it, and I think that's really interesting. Brian just said, I just want to do a little fact correct. Shark Tale is the only animated movie with De Niro and Martin Scorsese. It's probably the only one with them together. But De Niro also was in Arthur and the Invisibles, another movie that may as well be invisible because no one ever talks about it. So I just want to bring that up too. But yeah, Robert De Niro never did a lot of animated movies. And I think there might be a reason because this was not well received. At least he wasn't. Even though he's kind of one of the more harmless elements of it, he's literally just doing his own thing. And that's the thing. I think the talent is fine. Like, I actually think Renee Zellweger is actually very, very charismatic in her role. I think her character next to Lenny is the one the audience kind of feels for the most. Which again doesn't help because we're supposed to root for Oscar, and Oscar's a shit.
Let's talk about her character for a second, because this movie has a similar problem to a movie that's much, much better, and I don't want people to feel like I'm comparing, but that element there's that same element problem in Scott Pilgrim for me, which is that I don't understand what Ramona sees in Scott. Right. I don't understand what Ange sees in Oscar at all. I don't understand. I cannot see the attraction there. I can't see the chemistry. I can't see anything. The movie tells me that they are good for each other and that they're best friends, but I don't recognize that in the movie.
Yeah, and it makes it that her whole personality, her whole story is about the man. I think it's more so the performance I'm really endeared to. I think she's just a really sweet. Renee Zellweger just has such a good voice that I think like it works really well for this character. But I agree. I think the character is kind of wasted. And Angelina Jolie is also strictly there as a piece. Brian says sexiest character in the film. Yeah, but also at the service of like what plot, you know? And I get it's to show that like Oscars, you know, wishy-washy. But also, is that also a bad stereotype they're trying to convey and tell with that? I don't know. I don't know.
The Angelina Jolie thing, it feels particularly egregious. I mean, there's a lot of egregious representation in this, but it's not just that is a problem, a woman being there simply to be sexy and the sexing because there's no plot for her, but that they put that in this children's movie, and it almost feels reckless. Like it feels like no, people didn't think this one through, and that kind of bugs me a little bit. That bugs me a lot. I don't understand. Her character doesn't need to be there. I don't understand why it's there, except to drive a wedge between Ange and Oscar. But honestly, they're personalities is enough of a wedge between them that they didn't need.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, this one was okay. So I had mentioned it in a private chat or in the host chat before, but I originally I'd put this on to watch it, and then I started and then I was working on the slides for the Survivor thing, and suddenly I looked up and the movie was over. And I was like, I didn't watch that at all.
Because it doesn't reel you in, no pun intended, but it doesn't have anything that really catches you. The songs are all songs you've heard and are dated by the time it's already made. The character animations aren't that striking. I mean, the shark designs are all very bland. There's really not much unless you are a fan of these voice actors that really bring you in. And even then, like they're not known to be voice actors. So really is hearing Robert De Niro, are you going to go, oh, Robert De Niro? You know, I don't think you are, you know?
It's like I love that Robert De Niro and Scorsese are in this together for that fun little thing, but the target audience doesn't care. It doesn't know who Scorsese is. Probably doesn't know who Robert De Niro is, unless they saw like.
Well, the whole thing this was my introduction to Martin Scorsese, and I tell everyone they laugh, but I was 6, you know, and I think it's one of those things where we'd watch this, and my dad would be like, you know, what's funny is that he actually has big eyebrows in real life, and he would show me the picture of Martin Scorsese, and I'm like, oh, it looks just like the fish. He's like, yeah, and I think that's kind of cool because De Niro also has the mole cool, as the shark. He has the mole, so it's like a cool. It was honestly my gateway to crime films of Martin Scorsese. So I guess there's that appreciation I have for it as well.
Being an Italian in New Jersey, how are you ever going to come across crime films?
Right? Oh gosh, yeah. There's this little show on HBO called The Sopranos. I don't know. That hurts good. Don't stop. But yeah, I really think this is one of those films that I think I only like because of nostalgia. Like Cat in the Hat, I think there are genuinely elements that if I had seen it for the first time today, I would have still thought were very successful because of the because of the visuals and some of the performances. Whereas here, I think I solely like it because of the nostalgia. But as Kelsey has said, perfect film. A lot of people of my generation think that because it was a big hit. I mean, for at least a specific generation. And I did fact check. It was from Shrek 2. So Shrek 2 came out in May. This came out in October. So this was the big push that they were making with Shrek 2. This was the big marketing push. And the DVD for Shrek 2 had just come out before this. And that was a DVD that I wore out to hell. I had to buy 3 new discs of Shrek 2. I burned through that so fast because I needed one for the car, one for home, and one in case the others broke. Like I needed 3 discs of Shrek 2, and I bought one for my cousin. So I think I purchased 4 discs, or my mom purchased 4 discs of Shrek 2 as a kid. And I believe when we got it for my cousin for his birthday, he had already had it from his parents. So it was like one of those things where the Randazzos owned 6 copies of Shrek 2 between the 6 of us. Listen, you cannot get me enough Far, Far Away Idol. It was the best bonus feature on any DVD there's ever been ever. If you've never seen Far, Far Away Idol, watch it. It's like 12 minutes long. It's all the Shrek characters doing covers, and then Simon Cowell ends up picking a winner. and you get to decide who wins. Or if Simon doesn't like who you picked as the winner, he becomes the winner himself and sings in Frank Sinatra's voice. It is incredible. I highly recommend it. But again, the fact that a short bonus feature of Shrek 2 is better than a whole movie, Shark Tale, I think says a lot about DreamWorks quality at this point. Because I think after this, even they struggled to get back. I don't think it would be until How to Train Your Dragon, because I don't count Wallace and Gromit because that's Aardman through DreamWorks. That's a DreamWorks movie, but it's Aardman produced. But even Madagascar, I don't think that movie was necessarily as successful as people like to think because of nostalgia. Like I really don't think DreamWorks got their mojo back fully until How to Train Your Dragon.
About Kung Fu Panda.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, Kung Fu Panda. Yeah, you're right, but still not for another 4 years. And like, yes, the next year they win for Wallace and Gromit, but again, that's an Aardman movie distributed through DreamWorks. But DreamWorks really until 2008, Kung Fu Panda, I would say is the next time that it actually clicks again.
Yeah,
B movie, not good. Monsters vs Aliens is not good. You know,
I like B movie. B movie is I don't. I'm famously not really a fan of the of Kung Fu Panda, but B movie I actually enjoy.
I enjoy B movie too, but I feel like it's also for similar Framewreck-y reasons. Maybe.
Oh, okay.
Maybe the absurd.
That's also Renee Zellweger, by the way.
Yeah. So maybe we'll cover that someday. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anything else on Shark Tale, Matt?
So, I feel like there was another thing, but I have forgotten it. So, yeah, I think we can move.
You sure? If it comes back, you can.
Yeah, I think so. Because we covered. Yeah, we can
cool.
Move on.
All right, sweet. Let's move on now to the one I'm probably most intrigued to talk about, which is Click. Because this is the one that I think I have the most interesting history with, and it's the one that I think can both get better and worse in your eyes when you rewatch it, if it makes sense. And I'll kind of articulate that in a sec. But Matt, tell me about your first experience with Click.
I didn't see it in the theater. I saw it when it came out on video, but a bunch of people I knew had seen it and were like, "Oh, it's so great! Oh, I love it." And I was like, "Okay, let me check this movie out." Let me tell you that I was intrigued by this simply because I have long been interested in the idea of a story set with a magic remote. Like this this concept was something that I had been thinking about for a very, very long time. Like, what if you could pause and mute and fast forward, rewind? What if you had a remote?
Such a good premise. Like that is one of those premises that when it pitched, people are probably like, "How did this not happen yet?"
Right. You know? Because like, how is every kid in America doing that with their remote? But we haven't done this into a movie yet. Is the thing. So so the premise is very, very interesting. And then it's like, okay, Adam Sandler. Okay, I was a fan of his, especially in like the 90s. He had kind of started diminishing for me by this point. But I was like, okay, I think he had just done was 51st Dates the last one before this, or did he do something else before?
Maybe. While you're talking, I can figure that out.
Because 51st Dates I really, really liked. And so it's like maybe
my release date.
Maybe I had thought that there was a resurgence or something. Anyway, I was like, okay, let's Spanglish was around this time.
Before this, so leading right into this, we had just gotten off of obviously Punch Drunk Love, which is a little different because that's you know more art housey. But we had Anger Management, 51st Dates, Spanglish, The Longest Yard. Those were like before that kind of segued into Click.
Well, that's a mixed bag. So like 51st Dates I really liked. And Spanglish I really liked. Long Star was fine, but it wasn't like great. Punch Drunk Love, I really loved Punch Drunk Love, PTA. So there was so for me, like he had done more hits than misses for me at this. You know, there had been a resurgence. He had done a few like not so great movies, but like he was having kind of a resurgence for me. So I finally watched the movie. I'm Christopher Walken, love Christopher Walken. I'm like, okay. This is I'm really excited to watch it. I watched it and they basically he has fun with it for about 10 minutes in the movie and then the remote goes on autopilot and we don't get the fun with it. We just get the outcome, like the consequences of it. Which is fine if the consequences like interested me, and that was the problem, is that I like did not feel a whole lot for this guy because he's awful. Right. And I get that that's what you're trying to fixed, but a lot of the plot hole stuff, there were some plot holes that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, which you know, is to be expected. But anyway, I didn't really like it. I didn't like it at all. I was like, why is everybody telling me this is good? And I think Roger Ebert agreed with me because I read a review after I'd seen it. And I was like, yeah, see, he knows what's up.
He always did.
Yeah,
even when he was wrong, he knew.
Yeah, even when he was wrong, he's right. It's fine. Yeah, I didn't get it. And then I work in the video store, so like people would get it and come in and be like, oh, this is so funny. I'm like, was it? Because I didn't laugh too much at all. I also, there's also certain things about me that are always going to bug me a little bit. When a movie, and this is my thing with Kung Fu Panda, is that when a movie relies on the fat joke to be the joke, that bugs me. It's not fat characters or even jokes, or even jokes made by fat characters about their size. Like Chris Farley made a career out of this, and it always felt good natured. Mm-hmm. Adam Sandler does not feel good natured in this movie when he's making the fat jokes and stuff like that. And so there's certain things where I was just like, oh, it just did not click with me. I wish I could say that was on purpose.
I wish I'm glad it was not. That joke just went beyond, man.
So it just didn't work for me. This time I'm watching it and I'm like, you know, maybe I'm finally gonna see the thing that everybody sees in it. And I just didn't. Like, there were things in it that I was like, that I appreciated a little bit more. There are things that did not age well at all. Rob Schneider, it did not age well, this movie. Of course, him as a person hasn't aged well in terms of lots of things. But the you know, things didn't age well. The plot holes that I remember there being in it were more glaring this time. Like, I don't even know if I'd say plot holes, but a big portion of the movie is contingent on the idea that if he does a thing, the remote remembers it and does that thing forever, which is silly because that's not how remotes should work. They should be on command. But the biggest thing is that because he skipped a sickness, it fast forward through all of his sicknesses. And the big thing that bothers me, and it bothered me back then, and it bothers me today, and it shouldn't bother me as much as it is that he didn't skip his sickness. He skipped the family get together or whatever. Or no, his work. He skipped his work, and he happened to have slept through his sickness. He did not try to sleep through his sickness. That's what bugs me a little. I don't know why that bugs me so much, but it bugs me, and especially because the rest of the movie just is kind of feels like it's ruined because of that. Like, but I guess this is what they're going for. I don't know. It doesn't work.
Yeah,
I would love to hear your.
Yeah, no, it is very interesting because so my background with this is that I did a show in probably around this time, 2006 or 7, Children of Eden at the Cranford Dramatic Club, Cranford, New Jersey. Shout out! I was young Kane in that, and then actually when I grew up, I got to play Kane, which was kind of cool. Full circle moment for me. But I was the youngest one in the cast, me and my friend Hale, and so there were kids in the cast. When I say kids, they were like probably late elementary to middle schoolers, and I was 8, so they're probably like 11 and 12-year-olds. They were like not the teens, but not the kids. We were the kids, they were the teens. Then they were in the middle, and they would watch Click on their little like laptop or whatever. It wasn't even a laptop, it was like one of those portable DVD players. They would watch it, and we'd go over there like, oh no, you're too young for this, you're too young. And I was like, oh god. And then we would like go back again, they'd watch it the next rehearsal, they'd be like, you're too young, Dylan, you're too young. And I was like, and then finally I was like, Mom, can I please watch Click? And she's like, why don't you just ask your friends? I was like, because they said I'm too young or whatever. So she said, okay. She let me put it on, and I watched it, and there was just something epic about like getting to watch the forbidden movie that I wasn't allowed to see. And then when I watched it at the time, I think so much went over my head that I didn't realize what was so bad about it. And then when I talked to them, I was like, guys, I saw Click. And they're like, no way. All right, come watch with us then. Because they would watch it every day on the laptop. Like, that was the big movie, the big DVD. That was what they were playing every single day. And I sat down watching them, and I remember talking to them, and I was like, it wasn't that bad. And they're like, but it's so sad. So they were trying to shield me from the sad stuff. And they were saying that was basically too like mature at the end, not the him doing his wife really, really fast, not him, cursing or farting in the guy's face. No, it was the stuff at the end that they said like they didn't want me to be exposed to at the young age. And I really think this film always stuck with me because it was kind of one of those first big movies where I felt like I was watching a mature movie. And I know in retrospect now, there's a lot of it that feels immature. But I think this was like that last half hour, and a lot of people in the comments have been saying it, like last 20, 30 minutes is brilliant. I really do think that whole like last half hour where you see him like really realizing what he's throwing away or what he's about to throw away or what he is fearing he's going to throw away or whatever, because it is just a dream. But I do think that is really still powerful. And I think that's what I really resonated with, again, this rewatch. The scene with Henry Winkler when he says goodbye to him and he kind of brushes him off and he's like, that's the last time he sees it. And he pauses it and rewinds and rewinds. He's like, no, like, you idiot. That's the last time you see your father. Or, don't have to be even a father, but like just a loved one. If you could have that moment of like going back to the time you would see them at the last time, like that for me is the stuff that still works so well, that every time I watch this movie I'm reminded throughout that I'm like, oh, that's a little cringe, that doesn't really work. Like the Jennifer Coolidge stuff, she's just so fucking funny, but like it's very, it's a lot. And then of course I had to look up who Rob Schneider played when you mentioned him. I didn't even realize he was Prince Habibu or whatever, Habibu. I didn't even realize that was him. So like that stuff has not aged well. The whole flap of skin and like the fat jokes, all that has not aged well at all. I do think the comment when he's changing his skin tone, I look like Julio Iglesias, that's kind of funny. I admit that one had me chuckling a little bit because it's like, all right, fine, whatever. But like there are a lot of jokes that I think have not held up well. But I do really think the ending sticks it so well. And it honestly reminds me of like what people must have felt like watching It's a Wonderful Life for the first time. And I'm not comparing the two, obviously. They're very different. One, I think, is very pretty predominantly better, but I do think it's that idea of like the first time, especially at a young age, at 8 years old, that I really looked at life in this grand kind of way. And I think a lot of this stuff did go over my head when I was young, and I have revisited this a bunch, and I think I enjoy it less because I think the stuff that is supposed to be enjoyable and funny works less, but I still think it's a really effective movie. And it's more effective on rewatch because even in this past year, I've experienced some losses in my life that are still raw and still tough. And watching that, and watching, I'm binging a series, or I just finished binging a series, and there's an episode of that dealing with a loss that is very, tough to watch, and stuff like that is hard for me to watch now more than ever. So like stuff like this really hits. And even, the relationship. And again, Kate Beckinsale reminds me of kind of what we talked about with Kate, who did we just talk about? Kelly Preston, where it's like she's beautiful, but I think she's really underrated as an actress because Kate Beckinsale in this, like the scenes at the end when they're looking at each other and he gives her that napkin with the original thing he wrote her at the bar, like that kind of shit gets to me. I love that. And it's like she sees it and she gives him that look. And I gotta say, the makeup in this film, yes, the fat makeup is annoying and just dated and not good, but it is good makeup. And I do think the old age makeup is so good. Like it's next level. It's like on the level of Mandy Moore and This Is Us. The way they transform Kate Beckinsale in particular, that with that short haircut. And then when they age the parents up, like Henry Winkler aged up, kind of looks like almost Henry Winkler now in 2024 because he's now aged 20 years. But it is one of those things where I just think all of that stuff in the last half hour works so well. And there are still funny bits. Like I do like when he changes skin tone and because it doesn't go as racist as you think it's going to be. It's just kind of like one little sly remark. I do think it is funny. The stuff with Sean Astin, like I kind of like how he's a punching bag quite literally through the movie. And I think my funniest gag in the movie, I don't know if it's dated or in poor taste, but when he's late to the swim meet and the Asian kid swims up, he's like, "You're not my dad." And he goes, "As far as you know," or something like that. And then he's like, "What?" And then it's like one of those Chekhov's gun things where it happens later in the very next scene when he's yelling at the kids with the fireworks. He's like, "I hate that, man." It's just one of that great like little arcs for a little side character. So I do think there's still stuff that works. But I really think it's the emotional resonance of the ending that really stuck with me then, because it was like that big step into watching a more mature movie, even more than the comedy. I do think the comedy is a little dated, but again, we talked, the premise is really good as is, right, that I think even that is something that's still engaging, and Christopher Walken's always great. So like that's another thing too. Like I just think I know you might disagree with that, but because he's not doing his best work, Christopher Walken. But it is one of those things where I just think there's enough elements that work that overshadow the bad. But this is a film that, though it grows more emotionally resonant because of the things I like about it, it also gets worse in the elements that are dated. Like I think a lot of it gets worse, but a lot of it gets better. If that makes sense.
I will say this, because I have a lot to say about the stuff that you just said. First of all, Christopher Walken. No, I will never say a crossword about Christopher Walken.
Oh, good.
There's a long-standing quote from him that I don't know if it's even real or not, but people at least use it in their or people at least repeat it, and it's become just a known thing, which is that he has never said no to a project, and that there are movies he's never seen because no one's ever seen it, because it was filmed in a basement and they and no one put it out. So there's a long-standing thing that he has never said no to a movie. So Christopher Walken has plenty of time been the best thing in a bad movie. One of a quote it's the thing I quote all the time is a Christopher Walken quote from Joe Dirt, which is, "You're talking to my guy all wrong. Watch your tone, or I'm gonna stabbing you in the eye with a soldering iron."
That was a good impression, Matt. Good job.
I didn't know if I had it in me. Usually when I do my Christopher Walken, there's an old sitcom called Two Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza Place, which was later renamed to Two Guys and a Girl, which is where Ryan Reynolds first kind of got big right here. Also Nathan Fillion's in it. But there's a thing in that movie where where Ryan Reynolds is doing Christopher Walken impression, and the other guy's like that's not good, and he's like, or he said, "What are you doing?" He says, "That's my impression of Bernie's impression of Christopher Walken," and he's like, "It's not good." He says, "No, Bernie's is not good. Mine is spot on because he's doing an impression of someone who does a bad impression." Anyway, I have some I came and grabbed my my notes because I remember that I had written some notes, and I made pros and cons lists because I didn't want to just be all negative about it. So I wanted to write some pros, want to write some cons.
Because you did say you haven't come around on this one then.
I haven't fully come around. There are some things that I will talk about that do work for me, but because you were saying before that we were both talking about how the premise is so good. It's like I was talking with Cat and Hat that the movie doesn't do the premise justice. Like they could have gone in a direction that would have been far more interesting. Anyway, pros. I'll just read this list here. Pros: Sean Astin, Christopher Walken, Jennifer Coolidge.
Yeah,
and that's the list.
It is a good cast. Wait, one more time. Which names did you list?
Sean Astin, Christopher Walken, Jennifer Coolidge.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and it's great
because Kate Beckinsale as well is also very good.
Yeah, I think Kate Beckinsale is just so underrated. Like the scene where they first, sorry, I'll let you keep going, but just the scene where they meet for the first, or they kiss for the first time, and that Cranberries song plays. I love how that's like the emotional crux of the movie because you clearly, and they make him look a little schleppy, but like she just has the sweetest, most endearing look on her face. Like Kate Beckinsale in this movie quite literally makes me fall in love with her every time I watch it, which is so important. Yeah,
I think. Oh my gosh.
Your kid likes Kate Beckinsale. That's okay. Is he good?
Okay. Yeah, he's fine. He sometimes yells at her dogs, and I don't know why. Anyway, sorry. So she is great in here. I think she's mishandled. She's misused. I think that her character gives the main character the benefit of her having watched the movie that we just watched. And that's, I think, the problem. I think throughout the movie, she gives him too much leeway in a lot of things. And we see in the future that they get divorced or whatever, but it doesn't feel like he is ever held responsible for anything. And he changes. And you had mentioned It's a Wonderful Life. It's a Wonderful Life, Christmas Carol, Family Man, which is a movie I really like. That is the same thing, like that same premise of what would life be like if this thing happened, that kind of thing. So those movies, those things all work a lot better for me. possibly because I had seen all of those things by this point.
Right. Yeah, you didn't. I had nothing to compare to.
Exactly, and I think that's a big part of it. Now, I'd like to talk about the last 20 minutes of this movie.
Yeah.
Because you touched on a couple things that I did really, really like. And hold on, we're going to pause for just a second so I can talk to my child.
It's okay. I will say right now, we are doing well on subscriptions. Keep liking and subscribing if you're watching. If we hit 250 subs, we will unlock the Taylor Swift concert, which will be me doing a concert. So Taylor Swift will not be coming here. If we hit 2 million, Taylor Swift's coming. I will pay for her stay on the channel. I'll pay for her spot so she can give a private concert. But we are currently, actually, last we checked, we were at 12:30. Now we're at 12:56. We keep moving up.
Nice.
12:56. So we're at 146 in total. So that's really, really exciting.
Nice. That's exciting. Okay, so about the last 20 minutes of this movie. Okay, so I'm going to get a little sad here for a second. I'm going to try not to cry. Who knows what happens?
It's okay. If you do, I'll cry with you, and we'll get through it together.
Okay. I think I'll be all right. I don't think I'm going to do it because I've been all right this year. We just passed the 5-year anniversary of my mother's passing. And today, right before we went on for the Marvel games, I looked on Facebook and went to the memories and realized that today is the 5-year anniversary of her memorial service. And there was just so much sad on there. I was like, I can't look at this. I got to click away. Because I can't have done this right before going on air. So that aspect of it is something that I completely understand. And so, what would I do to know that the last moments I was going to have with my mom were the last moments? And I wrote my mother's eulogy, so I spoke her eulogy at the funeral. So I got to kind of talk about this. That the last thing that my mom came over to our house right before I'm sorry for everyone for making this all sad and weird.
Click is sad and weird.
Oh, there we are. My mom came over to our house that day so that I could, because my son, who is here with me, who you may or may not hear him whining and humming and moaning, he was to be born in 2 weeks when she passed away. His birthday is the 9th of this month, so it's coming right up. So he was to be born in 2 weeks when she passed away. So my friends were throwing me a dad shower, and so she came because my sister was going to go with me to that shower and just to hang out with my wife and kids and stuff like that. And then she suddenly passed away while she was here. And I was at the party. But before I went to the party, we sat and we talked about Game of Thrones, because she was watching Game of Thrones. And you can hear me talk about this on the Game of Thrones draft day. That because I'd use it as a really good as an example of why I picked one of her really weird points, or one of my really, really weird picks, is that my favorite episode of Game of Thrones of all times is
When they're
Night of the
sitting
Seven.
around.
Yeah, it's the Night of the Seven
Kingdoms. Night of the Seven Kingdoms.
Oh God, I'm sorry, my dog is barking.
Okay.
Hold on. Okay, so Night of the Seven Kingdoms is my favorite episode, and they're just sitting around, and I love that. But that's also the last thing I ever talked to my mom about, because the night she passed away was the Battle of
the night.
That,
The episode.
Yeah,
The night.
Yes, that one. That was the episode. The night that she passed away, the day that she passed away, that episode aired that night. So we were talking about who we thought was going to die, and talked about the last episode and how much I loved it and stuff like that. So I can think back to the conversation I had with my mom, and it was shooting the shit about movies, making jokes. I told her I had a raging throner, and that made her laugh.
Made me laugh.
And it was, I don't know, we had a good time talking, laughing. joking around talking about shows and movies, and that's kind of something we did a lot. So I know that I had a good experience with the last conversation with my mother. What I don't remember is, did I tell her I love her before I left? Did I hug her? Did I do anything like that? I don't remember any of that.
Yeah.
To have that moment to know or to rectify it, if I could, would be amazing. The problem is, if I had spent every moment you knew me being complete ass, and then suddenly you saw me having this moment, it would be sad and I would feel it.
Right.
I also would care a little bit less than if I had cared about you, or you about me. You would care a little bit less about that if you didn't care about who I was as a person.
Right.
That is my problem.
Yeah.
Is that I can relate to that moment so fucking well. I just don't relate to him at all, because here's what I have written in cons. He's a bad dad, bad husband, and bad person. Yeah. I don't feel better about him even at the end. Yeah, he rectifies it, but he wouldn't have rectified it until he knew the bad thing. And I know that's the point of all those things, of this type of movie. That's Scrooge's whole thing. Right. I love Christmas Carol, but at no point do I feel him learning a lesson until he actually gets to to that point. And I don't know. That's my big thing, is that I never connect with him at any point in this movie. I do feel the thing he feels, but at no point do I ever connect with him.
Yeah, no, and that's totally valid. And I do think that is something that I see, especially with the dated elements of it. It makes him even worse at times. Like the and I get, like, he's not responsible for the fat jokes and stuff like that, but like just some of the offhanded comments that he makes, it's not Adam Sandler's fault, obviously, but his character makes some comments that makes it even harder to really tap into that. But I thank you for sharing that story, by the way. It's always powerful when you tell it. But yeah, it's one of those movies that, like people in the chat have been saying, it almost is like two different movies in that sense, where like I feel like if you were only getting that last half, you probably care a little bit more. And I think it's also, in a way, it's to show that if you look at it from the kid's perspective, even if the parent's a piece of shit, the kids love him through and through. Like at the end, the kids are the kind of shining light. And I think that's also something to be said, is that, like, look how much those kids love you. You don't want to turn your back on that, because that's unconditional love, even more so than yours toward them, in a way, because all they look up to is their hero. Like, they don't know what you're going through necessarily, and then when that age comes, it's already unconditional. They don't care, and sometimes there are moments that don't always pan out. But in terms of like this story, I think that's a big reason why I also love it too, is that the kids are with him at the very end, and I think it gives him a reason to live. Like, but all you say is very valid. Like, I think it is harder when you don't like the character to really accept those changes and that growth. So it's difficult, but it's a very complex film, and it leads to some good discussions, which is very good. And I think when it hits the nail on the head here too, is he makes a very specific type of movie, and this is a drama where they tried to fit that type of movie into. And I think if they had let it just be a drama, I think it would have worked a little bit stronger than like all the too over the top farcical stuff, because most of it is either dated or just isn't as funny as some of his other stuff.
Right, exactly. And and I can relate to the bad father thing. Not that I'm a bad father, but I have a bad father. And if he was on his deathbed, I would surround him, like they do. But I also and maybe that's part of it, is that because I had a shitty dad, I feel less sympathy for the shitty dad. And so maybe that's part of it. And I love that he wants to become a good dad, or he becomes a good dad in the end. He's not a good dad before that. That he becomes a good dad, or at least seems like he does. But it's so I definitely understand those things, and I recognize, listen, that last 20 minutes, I recognize why everybody feels for this movie, because that it is powerful stuff, and it's just the rest of the movie that just does not work for me at all. If I may, I'm going to read the rest of this list of cons.
Please do.
I wrote,
I'm not ignoring you. I'm ordering food while you do this, but I'm listening. Yeah,
that's fine. I wrote, remember when ... in quotation marks, and I really wish I had known what that ... meant, because I have no idea what I was trying to say I know
is it one of
it's
like
in
the
quotes.
menu options, like remember
No,
when?
it's like
And
it's toward the, it must be toward the beginning. It's the first thing I wrote down. I assume that he said, "Remember when such and such?" Like he was making a generational joke that we all love and are not tired at all.
Right.
Then I wrote, and this is how I know it's the beginning. And then I wrote, Prince Habibu is also a problem with this movie.
And that's I agree with that.
Then I wrote, and this is my favorite. I wrote twice. He thought an RC controller was for the TV. That stretches incredulity. Like that.
That's funny.
I don't know that. I believe that he thought that controlling that a controller for an RC car was going to turn on his TV. And especially if he's ever turned on that TV before.
Right.
And then I wrote bad dad, bad husband, bad person, and then all the fat bullshit. That's the last thing I wrote there.
And it is so prominent. It is so prominent too. And they even make references to it when he's not again, and like the tongue flap thing of his skin, like all that stuff is like unnecessary. I do agree. It's really hard for me with all these films to really try to like look for the flaws, because I do have an enjoyment watching them, but this is one, like I said, that the flaws are much more blatant as I grow older and I become a better person. I'm able to realize what is wrong about it, but also just those sentimental beats when he holds up that napkin and it says, I forget exactly what it says on it, but it's like the thing he wrote when they first kissed. Like that stuff to me will never, ever, ever tire for me. Like I love it so much. So it's definitely difficult. Now, what did you think of Adam Sandler's performance in and of itself? Do you think it's a good performance? Because I think the stuff he's doing at the end is so good. But again, is it good in tandem to all the humor stuff?
Well, like I said, I had already seen Punch Drunk Love, so I knew a good drama performance he could do. And he will go on after this to do some really, really good drama performances.
Uncle Gems, Hustle,
Myron
Stories.
Reign Over Me, I think was the movie. He was
even like Funny People. I think he's a little more serious.
Yeah, that's a real blend of drama and comedy. But he does a more serious role in that, which I also enjoy. I'm a really big fan of his serious roles. So his performance in this, it wasn't quite up to what I wanted from him, even back then, just because I had seen Punch Drunk Love, though I was like, okay, he can give a better performance than this. But, and it also wasn't up to his comedic, so it kind of felt what we get from latter Sandler, which is that he now runs the place, so he does what he wants, and sometimes what he wants isn't necessarily the best thing for the thing that he's making. And that's kind of how that performance felt to me. I will say that he did have some funny bits and he did have some emotional bits that I did feel. I will say that there's a missed opportunity on a joke that I feel like they could have made much better. Number one, I don't understand throwing away the remote. I understand what they're trying to say with it, but even so, like, keep that remote. It's a magic remote.
But you saw what it did.
It's what it did because he was a shit person. Now he's not a shit person, maybe. I don't know.
And also because like it was a dream, so maybe it is just a regular old universal remote.
Yeah, maybe it's a regular remote. Maybe he can use that remote to, end world hunger or something. I'm sure there's something he could do with that. That would be fun. Yeah. Pause the world for long enough to grow enough food for everyone or whatever to build enough houses.
The Thanos thing. Yeah. Use it for good. Oh, I like that idea. Like have him at the end take the remote and go like changing lives. But I guess that is kind of just what he's doing by nature. Yeah.
And then and especially because he's an architect, like that dude he could pause the world and just like build one that works.
Yeah,
like,
pitch a building, be like, this is my diagram. It's already built.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that. But the missed joke that they did is that when he's done, he checks all of his thing and then he pats the top of his head like he knows he's on TV, and then he doesn't check his butthole, which is the one place that Christopher Walken said that it could go next. And I thought that would have been a much funnier way to end that joke, is for him to be like checking that he doesn't.
Yeah.
So
any other big moments? I think another one that a lot of people are hung up on a lot is the pregnancy or sorry, the birth. How it's from his mother's vagina. Like that kind of stuff though is like that's the fun of the imagination of the premise to me. Is like,
Mhm.
oh, the making of, like, that's very clever to me.
That is
It is a
fun.
little much that you're going from inside the vagina. I also think what's her name, who plays the mother, is also very good. Both parents are great. Julie Kavner, Marge Simpson, and Henry Winkler, I think, are also really, really great.
I think they're both great. They're
Yeah,
both
but
so good.
I think a lot of the stuff with the hijinks of the remote, a lot of it is very childish and misogynistic, but it's also something that I think a lot of people, at least at the time, were like, if I could slow down time, you know, this is what I would do. I would check this girl out, which is gross and icky, but like, you know, I think a lot of people were seeing it and relating to that aspect. Also, the fast forwardness of like, oh, I got to go do this chore. Let me fast forward through it, like taking the dog out to shit or something like that. Like, I think that kind of stuff is the stuff where I'm like, oh, that's clever, that's clever, that's clever. Like, I'm never necessarily tired by the premise. And then I agree with you. It kind of just takes off after that, where it's like, no, like, keep playing with it. It's fun, you know? Almost like it could have been a series even. And it might have been more
Right.
successful trying to like just a different adventure with this remote. What does it lead to? And then eventually gets into more existential stuff, but I don't know.
And there's also, and you actually point out a thing there that also kind of makes it feel unrelatable to me, which is that I don't know if I'd ever use the fast forward function. I would be constantly rewinding and being like, okay, watched a movie, rewind, watch another movie.
Well, and I think that might be part of what they're trying to say too, is that like, if you just want to keep going through life, then why do you even want to live it? You know, if you just want to brush through it, which I guess is the overall sentiment. I think really what it is saying, it's kind of like Cat in the Hat. Like, the messages it's saying are really clear and really pretty valid. The problem is, if you're not necessarily tapped into the character and don't want to root for him, it's a little harder. And I think that's kind of the main thesis of what we're getting at. Any other big moments? Any other train wreck moments or lines?
No, I've pretty much covered the stuff. I mean, I think a lot of the performance. Earlier we were talking about Sean Astin and certain things that moments that you liked. Some of the things that he does when he like pauses, I think are stupid. The whole all that stuff, like that
kicking
stuff.
Him in the nuts.
That kicking him in the nuts is so funny.
It is
because of the delayed response.
Exactly,
it is so funny.
It's because of also like the framing, the way they shoot it. It's like it's not directly on him. You see him kicking the nuts, but then it's back on the two of them, and he's very much in the background. You just see him in the background, like wincing. That I think is really funny, but it is also again childish, and I think that's the thing. It's where it's like depending on what you. But that's the thing is like if you hated him that much, would you also do that? Like, would you fart in his face? Like maybe you would. I don't know. I gotta sneeze. Talk.
I did a good job.
I did. What?
You said talk, and I did not talk. And I said I did a good job. So anyway, there are things about it that I think are valid, and I understand why people like it. This is not like a movie where I just can't understand, because there are some movies where I'm just like, I do not see what anybody sees in it. I see the things that people see in it. It just does not work for me in most ways. And that's the big problem.
That's fair. So there we have it. We've talked about all three. We technically do still have a half hour, Matt, if you want to do any last like superlatives rankings. If not, we can just kind of call it a day and bring on some people for some games and have some fun. And I get an early night to tuck in for your kid. But any last thoughts just about this slate in general, and just kind of about the nostalgic movies of my childhood? Do you judge me less for liking these movies?
I don't. I never. Here's the thing. I never judged you for liking them. I've always been a big proponent of, even when I make fun of people for things that they like, which I don't do so much anymore because I realize how it comes off. I used to a lot, but even when I did, it was never because I thought that their opinion on it was unvalid. I think that if you like a movie, you have a reason. It's if the only time I like have a negative opinion for someone's movie opinion is when I think the movie is harmful and they refuse to even acknowledge a problem with it. That's the only time. Like, you can like a problematic movie all you want. If you can't acknowledge the problem with it, then I judge you a little bit. So that's
the big one I was worried about is that I was worried you were gonna be mad about Miss Kwan, and there's no way I could ever just like, you know.
No, Miss Kwan was wonderful. I could never. So for me, like, even, you know, you like these movies. I don't. Number one,
never judge anyone for their terrible taste. There you go.
Yeah. Well, and it reminds me, because we talked about taste a few times in this thing. It reminds me that the quote, the phrase "customer's always right" is only half the phrase. The phrase is the customer is always right in matters of taste. So it does not mean the customer is always allowed to be an asshole. It means if the customer likes something, you can't tell them they don't like it. Yeah. So next time you're serving someone and they're like, the customer's always right, and I'm like, you can tell them that doesn't mean you're allowed to be an asshole. Anyway, yeah, in matters of for you, no, especially because of your age and how you grew up with these movies, I could never tell you that you were wrong for liking them or have a negative opinion of you for how you like it. Plus, I just said earlier, I like Terminator 3, so I don't. What can I say? You know,
right? Yeah, I think this is a really interesting experiment too, because going into this, because I don't know if it was the same for you with the last Nostalgia Junction. I went into this being like, all right, this is probably gonna taint some of my childhood favorites, and the only one that was like severely tainted was Shark Tale, because I think the glaring issues are glaring, and I don't think there's enough positive to outweigh it. But like watching Click, I was like, there's stuff that doesn't work, but I still really like this. And especially Cat in the Hat, I was like, this really isn't as bad as I thought it was. Or as I assumed it was, because the cultural meiosis told me it was, you know? So it was really fun to go back, because honestly, I had a fun time. It took me back to the times when I was a kid, sneaking this movie in and then going to talk with the girls at the theater about it. Like, oh, I got to watch Click. And they were like, how did you do that? You know, if you're listening, Stephanie and Liv, if you're listening, I finally did it. But yeah, Liv, I actually went to college with Liv. So, you know, it was a really great full circle arc. But yeah, I just think it's a very interesting experiment. I'm glad we get to do this and get to talk nostalgia. Any last stuff, Matt? I mean, I know you'll be on tomorrow morning, but do you have anything else before we end this episode?
When you were talking about, you don't know, you know, if I thought that I was going to be tainting some of my childhood things, I was not worried about Pagemaster because I'd watched it with my kids several times. Like, so I had seen it soon enough. I knew that there was nothing ever going to taint my opinion of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. I'd seen it enough times that I know everything about that. Right. The only one that I worried about was Three Musketeers, because even thinking back to it, I was like, oh, there's so much that I'm sure is just bad in this movie. And I still ended up liking it, but I also recognize that like some of this is just not great cinema. But so that's the only one that I worried about. But even then, it didn't really affect me at all.
Well, let's do the final thing we do on this show before we wrap it up. Mount Trashmore let's start with the one that I think is just the best movie, even though it's got dated elements. I know you didn't love it still on this rewatch, but Click, is it on Mount Trashmore?
No.
All right. Shark Tale, which we both agreed is not that great. Is it on Mount
Trashmore?
It's not
great, but it's not it's not Mount Trashmore material.
Okay. And that lastly, the one that I think we should at least consider, Cat in the Hat.
Okay, so we mentioned this is the closest to a Framewreck thing. Considering what we do have on Mount Trashmore, which is the Room.
Andy, but yeah, it's The Room. You rattle them off. You know them.
The Room, Plan 9 from Outer Space, Ben and Arthur, and what's the...
Troll 2.
Troll 2, my favorite. Troll 2...
Carly is in the private chat and she says if Cats didn't make it, neither should Cat in the Hat. Well, I will say right now, I think because of how stunning it's crafted in terms of production design and Emmanuel Lubezki's cinematography and just the overall craft, I don't think it's one of the worst 4 movies. Best of the worst. Yeah.
I think there's enough in it that, especially, I mean, honestly, just for
Mrs. Kwan.
Just for Mrs. Kwan and
no more big government. I will not stop saying that.
Just for Miss Kwan and Dakota Fanning, it doesn't belong there. So.
Cool. So none of these are making Mount Trashmore, but it's always fun to talk to you, Matt. Thank you so much for everyone who watched these movies. I know some of you guys watch these movies to prepare for this conversation. I appreciate you guys in the chat for doing that. Cat in the Hat, Click, Shark Tale, and I hope if you didn't watch that you're inspired to. At least Cat in the Hat for the reasons I like, at least Click for the reasons I like, and Shark Tale for maybe the reasons we don't like, so you can reassess. But hey, if you're Jersey Italian, let us know if you think the Shark Tale representation is authentic or not. But Matt, any last words from you? I know we'll see you a little later. We have one more Framewreck episode. If you're watching this part of our subathon, we're having another one with Stacy later on tonight, where we were talking about The Raven, which is going to be super exciting. And then we also have we'll tease it when we do that episode. We'll tease what we're doing later in the month with someone else you've been seeing on this channel.
I'll give you just the smallest hint, because we are going to tell you what we're doing next later this month on the next episode. But your hint is, that's a raspberry.
Oh, that's a raspberry. I thought that was you saying Star Wars Day really fast, because it is May the 4th. So there's 2 hints. Do with that what you will. Thank you, Matt. You're the best. We'll see you later, though, and we'll also see you for our TV themes draft day early in the morning.
Early, yeah.
It's back up, so get some good rest. But you do have to do a Framewreck. So again, hey, we're doing 2 Framewrecks in 24 hours. That's kind of fun. But thank you, Matt. Anything else?
That's it. Let's do it.
Right. Bye, y'all.
What a story, Mark.